Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Kimberly Bejan of SafeBreach, and today we have the webinar of validating the efficacy of your security controls. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have quite a lively session, and we'll be doing some demo as well. So please, at any time, if you have questions that you'd like, put those through in the chat at any time. And at the end, we do have a time for Q&A. Thank you so much for taking your time out today to join us, and I will turn it over to Stephen to get things started.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Kimberly. Just really excited to be here, and just what a great topic we have. I want to thank all of our attendees for carving out some of your valuable time to join us today as well. But great topic and a great panel of experts. So I want to just kind of jump right into that and introduce our speakers today. So Kimberly, who kicked us off, Kimberly Bejan from SafeBreach, and we'll be joined also by Jay Bromberek from SafeBreach as well, and I'm Steve Racing from ASMGi. And again, just very excited about the topic, validating security controls, and particularly, as it relates to working remotely. It's something that we're all having to get used to doing, and certainly it creates an opportunity for additional attack vectors and things like that. So we're gonna talk through those things. We have a lot of material today, so I'm going to try to keep moving pretty quickly. But as Kimberly mentioned, if you have questions, please just fire them off in your question box, and we'll try to get to them when we can. We are going to do a segment at the end on Q&A, but encourage you to shoot them over, and maybe we can get to them in between as well. But three topics really that we're going to cover today. One is validating your security controls, leveraging breach attack simulation, and specifically the SafeBreach platform, right? And then we're going to talk about the top 5 risks that show up because of the fact that you're working remotely, right? So we all know there are lots of opportunities that are resulting from that. And it's worth noting that the bad guys are not taking a break, right? Because we're all working from home. It's an opportunity really for them, and they're trying to exploit that and leverage it, and we'll talk some about that. And then lastly, as Kimberly mentioned, we're going to actually do a live demo of the platform. So I want to start by just introducing everyone to the concept of breach and attack simulation, and ultimately as that applies to validating security controls. It's worth just kind of asking the question, so how do you provide value and efficacy of your security practice? How are you doing that today? And that's one of the things I just wanted to elaborate a little on. So just from my observations, we interact with a lot of enterprises across all industries, controlled and uncontrolled, and various different things, right? Many of the enterprises today are characterized by these things, right? Implementation of security controls is really based on or driven by a framework. And I'm not in any way saying that that's not important, because it is, right? But what happens when you do that? A lot of times, if you're implementing controls because you have to comply with HIPAA, or because you have to comply with PCI, or because you want to carry an ISO certification, or in this certification, or whatever the case may be, it's very controls focused. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Okay, we're good, right? You've got all these things implemented. So it's a very controls based approach. The other thing I see a lot across the enterprise is not validating the controls, that are put in place, right? Not validating whether or not they work or whether they don't work. So for example, DLP is a great example, right? So a lot of enterprises put a DLP solution in place to prevent sensitive data from leaving the enterprise, right? From being exfiltrated. Do these same enterprises test if it actually works, right? So what we see a lot of times, data classification, is the person who's actually writing the document has to pick the classification or do other things. And we all know that DLP is designed to look for signatures and various different ways of identifying whether PHI or PII is leaving your network or things like that. But what happens when a person needs to get a document to a third-party constituent, and the corporate governance program doesn't work, or what have you, right? Maybe they classify it as unclassified data just so they can attach it to an email and send it. I don't know. Maybe that never happens. But my point is that I don't think people are doing enough work around testing and validating that the controls actually work, right? Prioritizing initiatives, huge problem across the industry. We see this with a lot of CISOs and leadership in IT and practitioners as well. Like, how do you make sure that you're doing the right things, right? The highest priority items, the things that actually impact your risk, your security posture. I don't know that there is a mechanism for that, right? It feels a little bit more like it's reactive than proactive. And then lastly, just not able to demonstrate a return on investment and a reduction in risk, right? So this is a key piece, right? So the board and the leadership team of enterprises, they're telling the security department, protect us from threats, right? Protect us from staying off the front page of the newspaper and these kind of things. But the security team is having a hard time demonstrating to the board and the leadership team in a lot of cases, like, how are we actually getting return on all this money that you're spending to meet these controls and these compliance requirements, right? All this money that you're spending to do these things, like, how are we getting a return on that? And how are we actually improving our security posture, lowering our overall risk? So these are some of the challenges that I see in the enterprise today. So what if there was a way to get more from the security dollars that you've already spent, right? The tools that are already in place. What if there was a way to get more from them? Do you think your board would be excited about that? If there was more benefit or more value to come from your existing controls? What if there was a way to minimize your security exposure? What if there was a way to ensure you're meeting your compliance requirements, right? So that you can go into an audit, for example, with confidence that you're going to not have a finding. That's a critical piece of the audit. Anyway, what if there was a way to test your incident response plan without actually, shutting down the server, for example, or installing malware, actually clicking on a link, right? What if there was a way to test these things, not just in a tabletop environment, right? Not just in a kind of a moment of pretending that something's going to happen and trying to get everybody to be a believer and just really indicate how they're going to respond to those types of incidents. What if there was a way to actually test an incident from happening? What if there was a way to prioritize your initiatives based on risk, actual risk, right? Impact to the organization. Risk is likelihood times impact, right? What if there was a way to prioritize initiatives based on the greatest amount of return you could get, from a impact standpoint? What if there was a way to prioritize based on how to actually lower your risk and improve your security posture? And then lastly, what if there was a way to rationalize your investments and demonstrate performance, right? So when the board says, or your leadership comes to you and says, hey, show me that this is working, that it's doing the things that it's supposed to do. I think it would be great if there was a way to accomplish all these things. And, I think there is. I honestly think that we can, blank piece of paper, design the ideal operating environment, and we can achieve that. And I think that what you're going to see today is going to help you create a vision of how these possibilities are attainable and achievable. And that's my cue to introduce Jay. And Jay is going to pick it up from here and tell you a little bit more about breach attack simulation and SafeBreach in general. So Jay, go ahead, please.
Thanks, Steve. You might see a bit of a flickering of the screens as we switch presenters. So in just a moment, Steve's going to pass me the ball, and I'll start my presentation.
Awesome. I'm working on doing that actually. So sorry about that.
No worries.
So as Jay mentioned, the audience may see a brief, there we go.
So guys, I'll be showing my screen in just a moment. So thanks, Steve. So what I want to talk about is I want to start off with talking about the reality of enterprise security. So what we've been seeing, and you're going to be seeing this in just a moment, should be popping up here. And what we've all been doing is we've all been doing the right things. So if we've been doing these things, if we put together the best teams that we can find and afford, if we're giving them the best controls that we can afford, and we're putting our trust, our company's trust, and our customers' trust in this team, the controls that they're using and the policies that they're creating, then why is it that the breaches haven't stopped or really even slowed down? We've just seen over the last 2 weeks, 2 different US certs come out. One came out yesterday, one the week before. So this leaves our bewildered executives asking, well, how could these breaches be still happening if we've spent all this money, we've put the right people in place, they're using the right tools, they're putting the right policies in there. They're also asking, will this happen to me? Well, to answer those 2 questions, how could this happen? Well, that's fairly easy to determine after the fact, right? There was a misconfiguration somewhere in the 70 plus controls, overlapping configurations, and arcane policies that these teams have put in place. There was a hole nobody knew existed and a risk they didn't know about, and therefore they couldn't mitigate. They're compliant, but that compliance doesn't mean that you're safe. Ironically, after a breach, it's easy to identify where these issues were, as several of those 70 plus controls are forensics tools that work really well in figuring out what went wrong, but they don't work very well in stopping it from happening again. To answer the question, will this happen to me? Well, the real answer for most organizations out there is I don't know, right? Even if the answer you're giving to your executives is, it's very unlikely. After all, we've hired the right team, we've given them the right controls, and we're trusting them to stop the bad guys. The reality is, we just simply don't know. So how do we ensure that the controls will actually work and stop a breach without actually having a breach? You know, as Stephen mentioned, he came up with a couple of questions I have. What if you knew where the holes were in your security risk, that you saw those risks, the risks they presented, and then you were able to prioritize the remediation? What if you could tell the executives or the board that your team proactively found several issues and they were able to use the tools they already had at their disposal to fix those issues, that you're not coming to them again for more tools or more people? Now, what if they were able to use those insights that they gain from these simulations and from these exercises and actually reduce the size and the complexity of that security stack, but still maintain the amount of security that you have? In fact, increase the security, lower the risk attack surface, and lower the risk to the organization. Well, SafeBreach, what we do is we give your team that visibility into your security posture. We give you that ability to identify and remediate the misconfigurations before they're exploited. That's what we mean by security efficacy. So in order to stop a breach before it happens, you must first see the breach happen without putting yourself, your team, your organization, and your customers at risk. So how do we do that? Well, there's 3 things we do. We do that by mimicking the tactics, the techniques, and the procedures that the bad guys used in your environment. We do this in your production, and we do this continuously and automatically for you. We take the results of those simulations and we paint a picture of the breach, how your controls actually responded. And then we present actionable ways to fix the gaps and link them to the business impact. This is simulate, visualize, and remediate. So I'm going to take the next few moments and talk about those 3 steps. So let's talk about simulating attacks. So what are the 3 critical capabilities that your team needs to simulate attacks? Well, first, they need the content. They need to know what to simulate. They need an extensive playbook of attack methods. They need that broken down to the core tactics, techniques, and procedures that are being used. What we provide is SafeBreach Labs. They're our dedicated team of researchers. Their sole responsibility is to generate and maintain our playbook. Right now, there's over 13,000 different methods defined in our playbook. They don't wait for something to come out. They actually proactively go out and find issues and remediate them. A good example of the effectiveness of this group was last week. As I mentioned previously, there was a US cert that came out last week. It is the US cert, it's colloquially known as the COVID cert, right? COVID-19 cert. Within hours, our labs had already updated our playbook with over 35 new methods, new breach methods. And this was in addition to the 23 methods that they had already released prior to the cert's publication. In fact, yesterday, another cert was released, this one on North Korea. This one's actually probably a little bit more dangerous because it's really targeting the financial sector. We're going to see more of a extortion, crypto locking capability as opposed to the phishing that you were finding in the COVID-19 release. So they've already released the plays into our playbook. So we're already covered. The second thing you need is—
Hey, Jay, here's a question really around that. Could you elaborate a little bit on what that actually means to put it and release it into your playbook? I mean, these simulations are actually available for people to use like now, right?
Correct.
So you could run that against your environment and know like right now if you're vulnerable to being attacked by North Korea or any of these certain things, correct?
Exactly. So one of the benefits, the unique differentiator for SafeBreach is that lab, and is the fact that the content comes from us, that we're rigorously testing, validating, and revalidating every attack method that we publish in our playbook. So the fact that that we know what they're doing and we know how to simulate it, mimic their behavior without putting you at risk is huge. And it's easy and it's flexible. Right? You need to be able to do this quickly and efficiently. We don't need to give our teams yet another tool that they have to spend hours and hours learning, or an overly complex effort to create these simulations.
Yep. Yeah. So I think a point worth making on that, Jay, is that, like, for example, when a new issue comes up, there's a lot of times, like the CEO or the board hears it on NPR on the drive into work. Maybe not today, right? Because they're not driving into work, but they see it on the news and they're asking the CISO or the security team or the directors,
what do I do?
Hey, are we vulnerable to this, right? And now I think what I'm hearing you say is that you have a way to know, like right now, if you're vulnerable to something that CERT is just reporting on. It is huge. I think it's a great benefit. Thank you guys.
Well, certainly. And more importantly, we're able to take the results of those simulations and we're going to report on those. So we provide extensive reporting and analytics capabilities. But what can you do with it? Well, we're going to give you a dynamic risk score so that when your board does ask, well, are we vulnerable? You can pull up that report and say, no, we're not. Or yes, we are. Here's where the issues are, and here's what we can do about it. So it gives you the ability to understand what's important to you, your team, your organization, your leadership, and show how it changes over time. So you can prove to the board what improvements you've been making and the value that your security program has to them. What you're seeing on this slide is two different ways of visualizing your posture. On the top, we're going to map all of those tactics, techniques, and procedures, all those TTPs to MITRE, and allow you to dynamically drill down into any of the TTPs to figure out exactly where you're at in relation to them. Are you blocking them? Are you vulnerable to them? The second is a graphical representation of the actual attack, where you can actually path how it goes from one simulator to the next inside your organization. So you'll be able to see where it's at, where the holes are, and how to prioritize them. And then the last thing we're going to do, remember I said simulate, visualize, and now it's remediate. Fix it. The one thing you need to fix the holes and reduce the risk are actionable insights. You need to know what to do. And your team with SafeBreach will give you these insights. We'll tell you what to fix, where to fix it, and how to fix it. We'll even, as Steve mentioned earlier, we're going to import your vulnerability scans and match your theoretical risk that they provide. You're potentially exposed to these 50,000 different vulnerabilities in your organization. We're going to lay those out to the actual results of the simulations that we run and give you your actual risk. Here's the business impact that these 5 vulnerabilities have to your organization. Fix those. The rest of them, you have mitigating controls that are actually working and blocking those. You don't need to do that right now. Eventually, you may want to, but right now, these are the ones that are critical for you. And this usually leads to the next question of how do you do this? What is it you do? And so what I want to show you is briefly is what ASMGi and SafeBreach, what we do to help you with this. So we're going to first stand up a console in the cloud, manage it for you. It's all part of the service. That console is going to have all our playbooks there. It's going to be where you're going to run your attacks, schedule everything, and basically your reporting engine. We're also going to stand up our virtual ethical hacker. So this is our neutered bad guy. He's the one who's going to do all the attacks, and he's going to be the target for you. Next, we're going to work with you very closely and identify where is it you want to put the simulators in your organization. Where do you want to put it in the DMZ, the servers? Are there critical server zones that you want to put it into? What about your end users? Particularly with remote workers, you're going to want to make sure that you have some end users covered there. So we're going to place those simulators inside your organization. And then you're going to run the simulations, and you're going to prove whether or not all those 70 plus controls that you've rolled out are actually working, and provide that information. So that's really the power of SafeBreach. So from here, we're going to talk a little bit more about the top 5 security validations for remote workforce, and I'm going to turn things back over to Stephen. All right, Stephen, you should have the ball. So guys, also I do want to remind you, if you do have a question, please do add those into the chat. We do want to hear a little feedback from everybody.
It seems we may have had some technical difficulties and lost Stephen's audio. So I'm going to, let's see.
I'm here. I'm back.
Oh, there you are.
Sorry about
Very
that,
good.
folks. Yeah.
No worries.
But okay, does everybody see the right screen? Top 5 security validations. I apologize for that.
We
Which
do.
is one of the residual challenges to working remotely, right? So in any event, so yeah, we just like the agenda said, we're going to switch gears and talk specifically about now what security validations are important for a remote workforce, and we're all obviously doing that right now. So Jay mentioned the CISA report. This is one from earlier, April 8th actually, but this talks specifically about the COVID-19 exploitations. You know, we've seen phishing emails from those. I get a lot of alerts about phishing emails and those kind of things, and I see those emails in my inbox. It's just amazing how many people are trying to take advantage of the fact that there's bad things going on in the world right now, and possibly we're a little distracted in those kind of things. But she said, is everybody familiar with who CISA is, and as an organization and those kind of things? It's a federal organization that's really focused on doing these alerts around different attacks that are pervasive and things that are going on in the industry. So I think it stands technically for Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, but anyway, net is there are a lot of these things going on by virtue of working remotely. So
well, and Stephen, one of the unique aspects of this particular release of or this particular malware campaign is that it's not just limited to email, right? We're seeing an increased activity around the SMS messaging as well. So it's
that's right.
It's very important to
That's right.
recognize that it's not just email, it's actually SMS and email that's happening.
Yep. So that is absolutely correct, and that's a great point to make. And the other point that's worth making is working remotely isn't just about email campaigns either, right? So a lot of people are working potentially on personal devices, even personal networks, certainly, right? So VPN technology, a lot of attacks, as we can see by some of these other, some of the other information. There's a lot of things going on with VPNs and targets specifically towards VPNs and phishing attacks and all kinds of techniques that you can possibly imagine as it relates to working remotely, which we all are. So without further ado, I'm going to basically queue up Kimberly now to speak, and she's going to take us through some of this information as it relates to the validating those security controls and what have you. Take it away, Kimberly.
Thank you so much, Stephen and Jay. Great job. So one of the slides that we wanted to show up here, as Jay and Stephen both touched on, was there's unfortunately on that last cert alert, it talks about a lot of email campaigns that have malicious links and malicious downloads to, really take advantage of everybody wanting to learn more about, of course, the pandemic that we're in. So and you can even see this is coming. You can see the example here we're showing. This actually showed from the World Health Organization. So very malicious material. Our labs team had a lot of this already in place even before the cert alert came out. And we weren't only just looking at phishing, as that was certainly mentioned. It's how do you really ensure all of your remote workforce? So Stephen touched on, certainly it's not just email, right? We've got endpoint solutions. They could be using a corporate device or maybe even one of their own personal devices. It's going to be VPNs, right? Because now you've had to stand up a lot of VPN servers, and now you have an extensive amount of traffic coming in through VPN that you weren't really planning on, of course. And now the support of all these home networks, because now that user's coming from the home network through your VPN. So there's a lot of points of attacks, and this is what our teams have been focused on as soon as we went in and then the pandemic was announced. So we've called out and pulled from our playbook a very extensive set of attacks that really help you understand what is your security posture and how do you stand in basis of these type of known attacks by running attacks that are very specific to test this now very diverse and very extended and broad network that you now have to support, having everybody work from home. And how long that extension is, I think that's still a lot in the air. It's still as we speak. I think I saw an alert today that we're going out at least another 3 weeks. So definitely something, and even when we do, is this, how long is that going to be, right? Is it going to be everybody comes in at once? It's going to be time. So you could have a remote workforce that could extend several months out. Really getting that visibility as soon as possible is critical. First step was get everybody working. Now it's show that visibility. So as I mentioned, our teams really went into and picked out attacks. And these are the threat vectors that we're really focused on in the playbook that's specific for validating your remote workforce. So in emails, of course, we just touched on, it showed an example, malicious attachments, malicious links. A lot of it's very social engineered, again, for the pandemic that we're in. For endpoint, it'd be at the corporate device with your security solutions on there, or even in personal devices where they may not have any security protections on there at all. We're going to be really running attacks to make sure phishing attacks, drive-by downloads, browser exploits are being really validated and protected. For VPN, a lot of VPN vulnerabilities. If you do follow US Cert, you'll see it's like almost every couple of days, you'll see alerts that come out, not alerts, but warnings on vulnerabilities, and a lot of them are for VPN. Brute force attack is definitely a key component that a lot of threat actors have used, specifically when they go after this extended employee structure. So brute force attacks for VPN, phishing, of course, with the VPN credentials. Now we just open the door into your enterprise. So that's a definite weakness that they go after. For the networks, it's your network and also, of course, the end users. So it would be brute force attacks again, malware propagation, and remote exploitation. And then fear of all fears to everybody is data leakage, right? So if somebody were able to penetrate anywhere, can they exfiltrate data? And that's one of the ones I think that Jay had touched on, the cert that was announced yesterday about the from North Korean threat groups. They're going after financial institutions heavily, right? So that's where you want to make sure some of that critical data is not leaked out in that situation, especially PCI.
Sure.
And I'm going to do a demo, and I'll actually show you some of how you can view if any critical data could be moved.
Well, and Kimberly, one of the things that we've done collectively as a security group is that we've had to address the fact that, like you mentioned before, we never really set up our policies to handle the amount of work from home users that we have, or the remote workforce we have, and some of the policies we've had to change may expose us to greater risk. We've opened up the timing on our VPNs. So now it's a longer time before they have to re-authenticate. That gives these threat actors more time in our environment to move laterally. And so it's becoming more and more of we really need to figure out what we've did, what the risk is to the organization, and how we can report on it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's a great point, Jay. The other thing, yeah, while you queue up for the demo, the other point is that the types of things that users have to do may be increasing as well, right? So things that historically have been done on premise have to be done remotely now. So people are adding things to the portfolio of access, right, without fully thinking through all the access controls.
True, absolutely. So let's dive into the platform. We're making good time here, but we would definitely want to give people time for Q&A, and there's been a couple questions that have come in so far. So let me jump over into the demo environment. Okay, so you should be able to see, this is our SafeBreach homepage. And what you're seeing here is our simulators across that would be run into your environment. What we're going to focus on, going to Jay's flow and of his deck, was really simulate, visualize, and then remediate. So I'll follow that plan as well. In our SafeBreach Hackers Playbook, here you'll see Jay had mentioned we have now over 13,000 breach methods in our playbook, and some of the ones that also he had mentioned for the latest alert. So from the cert alert that's being announced, and you'll see a blog, keep an eye out on our blogs and social media posts, you'll see that these new attacks had just come in. And then you also see some of the ones that were specific for COVID. So GraceWire was specific called in that one. There's some things here for Corona, right? And this is some of that malware attacks. In the playbook, you have that flexibility to run everything that we have in our playbook, or you could run plans based off, like, if you wanted to see all attacks of just exfiltration versus lateral movement. You could be going at certain attack types if you wanted to get really specific into techniques. You could use the MITRE tactic framework, so it would get all the techniques associated with specific tactics. And you could even just run them versus groups. And you run multiple different plans. You can set different times. But as you can see, we have a pretty extensive threat group list here. And even on top of that, you could take in, if you wanted to look at maybe ransomware, you could type that in, and we'll show, if I spell ransomware properly, there you go. You'd be able to see all the attack plans that we have that just covers ransomware, right? Or maybe it's a specific malware, like I think I had some samples here as well of maybe Drydrex. There you go. That's one of the more recent ones that came out in an alert. So you could just be running a subset of these. And again, at some point, you want to have all of them running in some sequence so that you know that you're covered across the board. But really, once you've decided all the variations that you do want to run, it's about now taking a look at the results. We're going to go in, so that's really into the pillar that Jay was talking about for visualizing. So we can look at these simulation results, and you'll see in a very detailed view of all the results, or you can even really take it from the full MITRE attack framework. And of course, Murphy's Law wants to be here on spinning when you're doing a demo. That is always the rule of the land, isn't it? But here we'll be able to show off in a second the MITRE attack framework. Okay, well, something's not happy right there, and I'll dive into one of those in a second, but let me show you some of the other visual reports that we do have. So as we were mentioning, you can certainly look at from our simulators, but when you put those different plans together, you'll get these types of reports right here. So now you're looking at all the different simulation techniques that took place and then giving a high-level view of the reports of what was going on in your environment and how you're protected. We can look at something. Oh, we jumped over and it went back into my MITRE. Let's see what's happening here. Okay, we're having all kinds of fun spin. I am so sorry about that. We'll definitely make sure that this gets changed up so that you'll be able to see those. If we do it, we'll put an on-demand version of this out as well. Okay, let's look into then, we'll go into another visualization of looking at our simulators. And I'll show you an Explorer view, because one of the questions that actually came in about, can we show, let me see what the question was. How do I tie the SafeBreach capability with crown jewels via IT assets and data? Which is really good question. So as I was mentioning, here's your simulators. This is going to be some of your users that you'll particularly be running from. And then you can have some of your simulators are going to sit in different security segment zones, right? So your end users would be in a user zone. You might have some databases that would go into server zones. And then you have something like your customer database and your PCI segment, which is your crown jewels, as you were mentioning, right? You certainly don't want anybody having access here. So we'll take a look and explore from there. And this is what we call our Explorer view. And this is giving you that hacker's perspective of the ways that they can infiltrate your network and move around. And each one of these numbers with the light bulb here is telling you how many attack techniques we're able to get through the different stages. So you can see it for infiltration and moving across the network and getting into that crown jewel zone, as you were mentioning. Now you can break from any of those, but another key component is we'll not only tell you how it got to the segment, into your crown jewels, I'll give you that same view of what it looks like when they actually were able to exfiltrate. And again, this is how many techniques they were able to take advantage of in your current configurations to actually get out of your environment. So again, I was mentioning we can help you break any one of these paths. The light bulb will take you to this third pillar that Jay was mentioning, and it was to be able to go to our insights to learn how you can remediate your security efforts. So here we're going specifically by that target. So that's your security zone. And here's exactly the techniques that were able to be exploited and the remediation that you want to do. So there's 9 protocols that weren't sealed up, weren't protected out of that zone. And you can share that with your security zones or download it and send it into another. I'll show you also with the user zones, we can show you a deeper line of this, of remediation. So here we have categories of if data is being able to leak, again, security zones. If it's through web, endpoint, email, network inspection, or network access. So we can see a network inspection and how many attacks we're able to get through and how you can remediate. The details, right? If you wanted to get into the details of it all, it does sit here. And you can then, from the remediation, see that you can actually share that off. So in this case, it's updates that needed to be for Microsoft Defender. So now you're able to share that off directly into your endpoint solution to make sure that these remediation efforts are done cleanly and easily. So as we were mentioning, where you can see all these big simulation results, but you could dive in and one by one fix them. But really the value that you're going to get out of SafeBreach is these insights are going to be able to show you all the mitigation efforts that you could do to fix up all your security gaps, right? So you don't want to just have to fix every one of the tactics and techniques. So what I'm going to do is take a chance and go back over into the simulation results, and hopefully that page has cleared up.
Well, and while you're doing that,
yes,
one of the things I wanted to point out, there were 2 things I wanted to point out. One is during that Breach Explorer, where it showed you that highlighted view of the path that you were taking. That's similar to what you're going to do when you're scripting out a pen test. But the problem is, what if they take a different path? And that's what you can also do with that Breach Explorer, is you can say, okay, well, this is the path that I thought they were going to take, but if they went a different way, how can they get in? And that's one of the benefits of not only Breach Explorer, but also the way in which we run those simulations. The second component I wanted to point out is, say you have all those remediations, you want to change Bitdefender, or you want to change the enforce those mitigations. You can actually send that directly to a SOAR platform to automatically remediate those as well.
And Jay, that's another question that had actually come in about some integrations. So we'll touch on that as well. Thank you. So we did get the MITRE up. Sorry about the technical difficulty there, but this is the MITRE heat map. As you could mention, there was all the simulations you could drill into, or you can even simulate this out and look at certain segments, or if you wanted maybe, again, to maybe some of those threat groups and just see what kind of tactics and techniques they're using. But this is all the MITRE coverage that we have for your endpoints, so your infrastructure. You can look at this at a high level to see there's some areas here, of course, of red or in concern that you want to put a little more focus into. Some areas you're pretty clear on, which is great. And then, of course, some things you might want to focus a little bit more on. So let's dive into these and we can talk about a little bit more into integrations as well. Since we're doing and validating your security controls, it's really important that we have integrations so that we can tell you, which of your controls stopped and blocked all these various techniques. So here we had 578 simulations and 14 of them were logged, 384 were blocked. So let's just take a look at the ones that were able to actually stop this. So as we expand on any one of these, you'll be able to see this was an extract process using Microsoft. Let's take a look what that says. Windows commands, so a pretty critical one. It was prevented. We can dive in and take a look at the details of each one. So you can see it was blocked and it was prevented. And from the security events, you'll see the details of what was actually going on. By the way, you have the detailed MITRE classifications telling you the threat groups so that you may be of interest. And then which of your security controls actually prevented this attack? So here we're showing that's because of the tight integrations, we're able to correlate the simulation from those logs and that data, which of your security controls actually blocked, stopped, detected, all those variables, and then we'll report to you which ones actually achieved those. So now you're seeing those tight integrations. So the question that actually came in on here was about a ticketing system and SIM. So we have integrations with not just endpoint network solutions, but your SIM solutions, SOAR platform, as Jay had mentioned. So you could do a level of automation to this, and ticketing systems. So I think the question specifically was for ServiceNow. So yes, SOAR and your ticketing. Okay, so from there, we've got, that was our MITRE attack plan. We did go into the Explorer view to show you that. So let's jump in now. We really wanted to focus in on the remote workforce. So let's take a look at, there is a plan that was very specific that covered those email, endpoint, network, VPN, and data leakage. So we have, when you choose your playbooks and the simulations that you want to run from the playbooks, they'll come in here as plans. As you'll see, we have built out one that is available to all the customers that runs these attacks that are very specific. And it's 100 attack techniques right now. It will run across your environment, and then it will give you a detailed view of a report. So here's that remote workforce validation report after the simulations have run. It'll tell you how much was not blocked, give you some statistical data, where you're most vulnerable based off of those simulations of the attacks that ran, and the security controls that protected you or maybe have let things in, which of the simulators are most at risk. And then down here is the very detailed version of every one of the attacks that was not blocked or it was blocked. And you can drill into each and every one of these to get the details from those. It's really diving down into the weeds. What you really want to go is, again, to that insights for the very higher level view of the remediation effort. So if we take a look, we can dive back into those insights. From the targeted section, you can highlight exactly which of the simulators that were of most of concern. So we can certainly take a look, particularly at like, or one of our user zones, right? So we can take a look there and see which of these attacks and techniques we want to clear up to resolve. And again, that mitigation is going to be able to share. This one again is also with Microsoft Defender, so you're able to share that off directly. Or if you had raw data, it was a solution that doesn't have integration pieces, you can send that and share that directly off into those solutions as well. Okay, and then one of the other visualizations that we talked about slightly is these executive reporting. So in here in your reports, we have a known attack series. We have several different reports like, your security posture against specific threat groups that was mentioned earlier today. Some of the CERT alerts that we have, you'll see they're actually listed in here as well. So the CERT that Jay had mentioned is certain right here, that COVID alert that came out yesterday, and the new alert is coming in today. So that, actually, it's already in here. So that's the alert for the North Korean alerts that we're posting out today. It's already into the platform for users to see. But we have a specific one for remote workforce to really give you that view of how does your posture stand against these attacks that are specifically designed to help give you that visibility into your remote workforce. So we have, of course, from network propagation, where your risk levels are at, some insights into where we went into insights to show you how you can remediate. And then easily from here, you can take and rerun once you've made the insight changes. You can rerun your simulations and then see this risk score again, of course, see it from the plan, see it from any of these level reports to give you that visual aspect. Okay, I think we've addressed a couple of the questions that actually came in too today, Stephen and Jay as well, which is really good. And I just want to make sure if I have anything else. So we did talk about the ServiceNow. We talked about the crown jewel assets and how you can remediate that. That was certainly where I showed in the demo from the Explorer, where you can break that path, especially if you can see data can be exfiltrated from your crown jewels. And I think I've covered, the other one actually is a nice tee up for you, Stephen, about a managed service offering. So I think with that, I can turn the controls back over to you, Stephen. Are you ready?
Okay, I am ready. Fire when ready.
There you go.
Boom. Okay, this time you should hear and see me. So,
we sure do. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you so much for that, Kimberly. It was wonderful, and there's just so much there. It's, I'll tell you what popped into my head as I'm watching you do these things is time to value, and that is such an important topic to highlight. There's immediate value, right? When you're turning new threats around so quickly, and all these TTPs, associated TTPs, as it relates to the certs and various different pieces of information that are coming out, people can test for those like within a couple of days. And I think that, again, leadership and boards and CEOs are asking those questions. Are we at risk? Are we protected from these things? And it's just phenomenal. So thank you so much for doing that. I know we're kind of winding down on time here, and I want to have a chance to get through all the questions. But before we do that, I want to talk specifically about a special offer that we're making today, just for the attendees that are on. And basically what it means is, the focus of today was really about helping you understand what is breach attack simulation, what does it look like, what does the actual platform look like, right? So doing the demo, but validating security controls, particularly as it relates to working remotely. And we want to make that offer to people who took the time to attend today. If you want to see if you're at risk or if your company's at risk and those kind of things, we're willing to do that for you. So how do you basically do that is just contact us, send an email to sales@ASMGi, say I'm interested, and then there's a little bit of scoping questions involved in how we kind of frame up the simulations and those kind of things, but we'll actually do that for you and run the simulations and give you the output from that and help you understand where your weaknesses are and where you're vulnerable to attack and those kind of things. So Jay, do you want to chime in on that at all? I think it's a great opportunity for people to, see real time, really experience the value that, that can happen right now from this type of activity.
Right, and the beauty is that it's a very quick effort to stand up a console and deploy those simulators for you. We know,
Yep.
and ASMGi knows exactly where to run them. We've done this many, many, many times before, and it will give you results. Typically, it's less than a day usually.
Yep. Great. And so let's move into Q&A. And before I start on some of the other questions that have come in, I want to just address Kimberly. Mentioned someone asked about managed services and how we really, I'll say, help you address these needs. And so one of the other things I noticed as you were doing the demo, there's a lot, right? There's a lot to learn, and this is one of the challenges that we see at enterprises. How do I add capability when I just don't have the resources to do it, either headcount or technical expertise or those kind of things? And I think it's worth noting that we'll do it for you, right? And that's really what a managed service is about, is we'll actually do these things for you. So we'll take the time to really understand what outcomes you want to accomplish and what you want to achieve, and then we'll actually do it for you. So you don't have to add headcount. You don't have to learn a new platform. You don't have to learn new technology. Certainly you can, and we'll transfer all the knowledge we can, but we have a tremendous set of experts in SafeBreach that we can leverage to really understand the thought process and the mentality, how are attackers really getting inside of networks and compromising networks today, and we'll leverage that, and ASMGi is here to help you
Certainly
really apply that to your environment. So a couple of questions. So let me get through these because I know we're winding down on time. So one of the things, okay, here's a good one. It says, all right, so one of the slides, I think Jay, you had a slide that talked about 12,000 methods. Mm-hmm. So the question is this: 12,000 methods is great, right? But that's a lot, right? How do we know which ones to run?
Right, and that can be
kind of a follow-on question. Yeah. Can we run them all?
Analysis paralysis, right? You've got too many things to do. How do I pick the 50 that matter to me? And that's really where the experience with SafeBreach and SafeBreach Labs comes in. So we're going to work closely with ASMGi, with our customer success team, to help you define the right simulations to run. We'll tell you approximately how long they'll take, and then tune them for your environment. So we're not just going to leave that away from you.
Yep. Kimberly, anything to add to that? Kimberly might be muted for a second. I'm curious, Jay. Whoops, here she is.
I was muted, but yeah, Jay covered it very well. Thank you.
Yeah, what about, so the second half of this question is, can we run them all, right? What are the situations where that might be appropriate?
Certainly you could run them all if you wanted to. You want to make sure, though, that you're really running the ones that make sense for you. So sometimes we'll see customers who want to do a benchmark, and they will, on a very regular basis, run all of the breach methods out there. And then what they'll do is they'll start using that as a means of setting their risk and then slowly reducing that risk over time.
Yep. Yeah, so just a little bit to add, and I think, Kimberly, you mentioned this in your demo, right? It's a good idea to get on a cadence and, regularly schedule certain things to, kind of cycle through a cadence of running simulations and methods and different attack methods and those kind of things. And Jay, I think you talked about, like, if you can run a certain attack method, but what if you make a different decision, at some point in time and go a different path and those kind of things. So all of those scenarios can be built and scheduled to
Certainly.
run. And one of the scenarios to run all of them might be just to kind of baseline, right? So, right. And that's probably a good lead into the next question, Jay. The question is this: I understand validating controls, but how does the solution help me prioritize initiatives?
So prioritization is key. We'll understand the risk to the organization, And as I mentioned before, one of the areas that we see customers doing is taking in those vulnerability scans and comparing them with the results to give them the actual business impact of a true vulnerability. And so you'll be able to identify, can somebody actually take action on this vulnerability, and allow you to determine whether or not this is something I want to address right now. Now, I had another question come in over the line, and it was, does SafeBreach attempt to eliminate the need for traditional pen testing and the red team exercises? And that answer is by all means no. We're not going to take the place of traditional pen testing. There are specific reasons why organizations need to go through pen testing, right? Most of those have to do with what Stephen mentioned earlier, compliance reasons. For PCI compliance or certifications, you have to do a manual pen test once a year. We're not going to take the place of that. We will provide tools so that you can make that more effective, quicker, safer to do. And the second part of the question has to do with red teaming exercises. Not at all are we going to take the place of those. We actually find that what customers do is they use SafeBreach as part of those exercises to see what can be breached, how you can make those exercises more effective in the organization, go across a broader range of locations, and then really make it so that your experts are a lot smarter. Hopefully that answers that question.
Yep, that's a good point. And I mentioned time to value earlier. The pen testing is a great example, I think, of a use case for breach attack, for SafeBreach particularly, right? So once a year, I mean, that's pretty standard, right? To do a pen test once per year. So I think we're naive to assume, and I don't think anybody really does, right, that the environment doesn't change in that, for a year, right? It's a point in time exercise that, so this is one of the challenges I see with traditional pen testing is it's a point in time, and you're going to wait an entire calendar year to redo that. So there's a lot of hope is not a strategy. I go back to that, right? There's a lot of hope involved in, hoping nothing bad happens. And then you have an opportunity a year later for the pen testers to come in and revalidate, what you have. So just creating a path to do that more often, I think is huge. So let's see what else we have for questions here. We actually had one about red team exercises, right? What's the difference between the simulations and the red team exercises? Do you want to elaborate on that a little bit, Kimberly or Jay?
For sure. So, I mean, with the simulations, the way a lot of teams will look at this is, you spend a lot of money on a red team to do very detailed, specific attacks that are unique and haven't been seen in the wild. I mean, that's ultimately when you want to buy a red, hire up a red team for. A lot of these are all known attacks that just weigh down them from being able to do the really creative, geeky things that they love to do. This takes the weight. Red teams actually enjoy this quite a bit because it takes a lot of the stuff off of their back. They can quickly even show everything through a MITRE ATT&CK framework, and then they can get into the really deep specifics of what's best for their enterprise and to really, create attack types that aren't seen in the wild. And
we'll do the boring stuff.
We'll do okay, that's one way to put it.
You do the stuff that really is that frees you up, that you want to do. The reason you became a red teamer was to do that.
Yep. Yeah, I think honestly, one of the things is what you know, and you're one set of eyes, right? So your perspective is at the table for red team exercises, and in the case of SafeBreach, you have an entire team dedicated to building simulations that really understand what's going on in the wild, right? It's another perspective. It's a huge upside to have another perspective, another team of experts on your team, ultimately, right? From my perspective, I think that's a great thing. So, is this solution? So here's another question, real quick, and we're winding down on time, so I'll get through the remaining ones pretty quickly if I can. Is this for enterprises only? What about mid-market companies and smaller businesses? Can they leverage this, or is this an enterprise-only solution? What do you think about that, Jay?
Well, certainly they can. We have customers that are very large to very small. The beauty of the solution is that, you know, both ASMGi and SafeBreach, we're hosting this for you. And we're running these simulations for you. So you don't need to have an extensive team to implement or manage or utilize the solution for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And if I would just kind of bolt on to that, you know, the thing about enterprises is a lot of, particularly large enterprises, right? They make a huge investment in security, and they probably have threat hunters and threat intelligence feeds and red team, blue team, purple team, and all these kind of things, right? They have the resources to execute on that. Smaller companies, mid-market companies, and you know, into the smaller end of the mid-market, they just don't have those resources, right? So to be able to leverage a team of experts to accomplish those things, I think is a great opportunity for smaller businesses. And that doesn't mean that enterprises can't use it, right? Because it's a great opportunity for enterprises as well to, you know, complement the things that they're already doing and even do things that they just don't have the capacity to do. So great opportunity for both. I agree with you. So time for one more question. I'll make this the last one. So earlier in the presentation, we mentioned the CERT alerts and those kind of things. You guys, you know, how closely do you work with CERT? Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Can you tell a little more about that? Is how the question was actually written. What do you think about that? I mean, are you guys?
So we have SafeBreach Labs, and SafeBreach Labs, they're a dedicated team of researchers. They subscribe to all the feeds that everyone does. They scour the dark web. They actually go out and proactively try to I guess break is the right way to do it. Break tools and break systems and find exploits. They'll work with the vendors and they will fix those exploits. You know, what we've been able to accomplish or show with the certs is that most of the time we're going to have a significant number of the issues that are released as something to watch for in a cert already covered in our playbook, because we're proactive, because the team already knows what's there and is able to address those before they become a generally known problem.
Yeah, perfect. Kimberly, anything to add to that as we wrap up?
No, I think we've covered a lot. I'm sure, and I'm hopeful that you're going to get some people contacting in, and then we can move you into some of the next stages. It's really an exciting time and platform, and we really are here to help. We're teamed up together beautifully to help each other out. So we're looking forward to working with you.
Yep, excellent. And there was a question about how do you sign up for the special offer. And just real quick, I mentioned this as I went through that slide, but I'll just reiterate again. We're going to send, actually, you know, capture the presentation. It'll be available to everyone. We'll send a follow-up email out with links and how to get to the live video of the presentation and those kind of things. But to take advantage of the special offer, just send an email to sales@asmgi.com. And we'll share this in the follow-up as well. And then we'll set up a call and just talk through it with you and just make sure we understand what parameters you want to work with and those kind of things, and then, you know, make it happen. But I just want to be respectful of time. I want to thank everyone, Kimberly and Jay. Thank you so much for sharing this information today, and thank you attendees for, you know, carving out your time today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.